Hello, and welcome to the 2022-2023 SLA Mini-Grant Business Meeting. Congratulations on receiving your grant, and a special congratulations to recipients of the inaugural Secondary School Mini-Grant. This webinar will cover the requirements, timeline, and recommendations for grantees to complete the grant successfully. If you were unable to attend a business meeting in person, please watch to the very end, as this webinar is packed with information grantees will need to successfully implement this grant. The program lead for the School Library Access Mini-Grant program is me, Jeannie Standall, and Talela Florco, our Grants and Contracts Officer, provides support on the financial side. We are both available to address whatever questions, concerns, or issues might come up during the program year. One of the documents in your grant package is a sheet with our contact information, so please don't hesitate to reach out. The goals of the two types of SLA mini-grants are similar, and as you make decisions about your grant program and how to spend your funds, it's hard to go too wrong if you keep the goals of the grant in mind. For the Early and Elementary Literacy Grant, the first goal is to increase the amount of reading done in homes of children in elementary school, and for first-time grantees, particularly pre-K, kindergarten, and grade 1 students. For the secondary school grant, the main goal of the grant is to increase the amount of recreational reading done by students in grades 6 through 12. Increasing the number of quality, age-appropriate, interesting titles in school library collections, increasing the number of students reading on grade level, and increasing the financial support for the school library are goals for both types of mini-grants. The big picture for this year's SLA mini-grant program looks like this. We awarded $200,000 to 41 grantees across the state. There were 18 early and elementary literacy grants, and 24 grants went to secondary schools. This year's grant period will stretch from August the 8th, which was the date of our first SLA mini-grant training, to April 14th, 2023. Take a look at the map that was included in your grant package. This is your cohort this year. It can be very helpful to talk with someone who's working with a grant to exchange ideas and to brainstorm problems. If you'd like to reach out to any school librarians who are grant recipients this year, just let me know and I'll connect you. In your grant package, along with the map, you'll find a copy of your grant application, which also serves as your grant agreement. There's a detailed grant timeline. All of the absolute deadlines are in red, and the strongly suggested pacing guide is in black. Please be sure to add these dates and deadlines to your calendar along with reminders. On our website, on the SLA mini-grant page, you'll find a Grant Management Best Practices tip sheet. You will also find on the web page a list of questions that will be on your interim report. There will also be a link there to the interim report as we get closer to reporting time. Similarly, you will find questions to expect on the final report, and there will be a link to the final report there too when it's time to do that reporting. There is also a sample of the type of financial report that's required for this grant. Last spring, via email, you received your award letter, and there are some useful bits of information there. At the top, where the PDF of your grant application agreement is attached, you will see your grant number. We have many schools in Idaho with similar names, and it's very helpful when you include your grant number on all your official submissions so we can keep your documents together. There's also a link to the SLA mini-grant page where you'll find lots of helpful resources for implementing and completing your grant. It's been a while since you applied for and were awarded this grant, so take another look at the grant agreement and make a note of the requirements to which you agreed. As you transfer dates and deadlines to your calendar, read through the agreement again. Circulate the agreement to your principal and your superintendent, especially if either or both of them are new. They may be unaware of this grant. If you are a repeat grantee, make sure they are aware of the 10% match and that the match must come from school or district dollars, not from your fundraising efforts. Review the information you submitted for your Plan B. It seems unlikely that school will be closed again, but it seemed unlikely a few years ago too. It's best to be prepared. With those possibilities in mind, let's take a minute to think about the requirements of your grant and the barriers to meeting those requirements in the event students are not coming to the library in person. How will your books be circulated to your students, especially the grades targeted in your grant if they're not coming to the library? How will all the grant money be expended if you or your financial team are working from home? How can family literacy events be held remotely or virtually? How will you have access to the data needed to complete reporting? What other issues do you need to consider? Now, think about the strategies you used to get books into the hands of kids when you didn't see them either at school or in the library. What worked? What didn't? If you had to do it again, what would you tweak? Maybe you're a veteran at dealing with the quick pivot, or maybe this is your first time in the library. Whatever the case, now is the time to plan for these contingencies. If you've got questions or need a sounding board, give me a call or shoot me an email. We can chat, or I can put you in touch with a current or past grantee who worked with this grant during COVID. The grant requirements are kind of a big deal. Not like guidelines, they really are requirements. So if you are a first-time grantee with the Early and Elementary Literacy Grant, all pre-K, K, and first graders will be allowed to check out more than one book per week starting in their first semester of school. Students in all grades will be allowed to check out nonfiction books. Why, you ask, is this a requirement? When this grant began, there were many elementary schools who simply didn't have enough nonfiction for all students to check them out. If you're in this situation, we hope you'll use this grant to solve that problem. All grant funds will be spent on age-appropriate books for pre-K, K, or first grade students. Funds may be spent on fiction or nonfiction, but at least 40% of the funds must be spent on nonfiction titles. And that's 40% of the funds, not 40% of the titles. If your school has received a mini-grant in the past, your grant requirement highlights look a little different and cover all the students in your school rather than just the littles. All students, even the youngest students your school serves, will be allowed to check out more than one book per week starting their first semester of school. All grant funds will be spent on age-appropriate books for the elementary students served in your school, which is up to 6th grade. Funds can be spent on fiction or nonfiction, but again, at least 40% must be spent on nonfiction. The school or school district must contribute a 10% match from school funds and not from library fundraising efforts. That will be spent on books during the school year. It is important to note here that grant funds are meant to supplement any money already funding the library, not supplant it. For our secondary school grantees, the requirements are a bit different. All students will be allowed to check out and take home books of their choice for recreational out-of-school reading. Grant funds will be used to purchase titles intended for recreational rather than required reading. Grant funds may be used for library reading programs that are meant to create a culture of reading in the library or throughout the school. Some examples of programs that would fit the bill are Young Readers' Choice Awards, book clubs, and Idaho Battle of the Books. Grantees will develop a program or event aimed at creating a culture of reading at their schools. We're looking for programs that appeal to students who aren't regular visitors to the library and/or those who don't read for pleasure. This year, ebooks and e-audiobooks are allowable purchases with these grant funds. Digital materials like this are very useful tools, especially when we're working with students who can't or won't come to the library to get print materials. There are, however, some considerations for ebooks and e-audiobooks. If you invest in e-materials, how will your students access them? Do they have an internet connection available? How can they download at school? Does your school's Wi-Fi extend to the parking lot for after-hours access? Do students have a device on which to read? Many schools have become one-to-one schools where each student is issued a device, but many have not. If not, are there devices students can borrow from the library to take home? Do students and parents have the know-how to access and check out digital materials from outside the school building, especially the parents of the youngest students who may need help downloading materials? Is there a plan in place to maintain the titles bought with grant funds? Different ebook vendors use different models for access. Some ebook and e-audio titles expire after a time limit, and some expire after a number of circs, and some are the libraries to keep. It's important to understand how each vendor manages those details for each title you purchase. Speaking of ebooks, take a look at the IDEA, or Idaho Digital eBook Alliance page at libraries.idaho.gov and check out all the titles there. If your school district has not already, you can join IDEA and have access to thousands of titles appropriate for K-12. This collection is purchased and managed by ICFL. Joining IDEA costs your school and school district nothing. You get access by joining the Alliance, and students access the collection with Sora. Dozens of Idaho school districts have joined and are using the collection. If you haven't, get all the details on the website and contact me, Marina Rose, or Dylan Baker for more details. There are a few specific things that are not allowable with these grant funds, and we'll talk about those here. AR tests and supplies are not allowable. There are a lot of subscription services out there, but subscriptions are not allowable simply because you cannot complete the subscription during the grant period. And you can't buy food. There are some very important hard deadlines to remember. Again, please transfer them to your calendar along with reminders. Grantees will complete 2 grant reports during the grant period. The interim report is due January the 20th, 2023, and the final report is due April 28th, 2023. On March 3rd, 2023, 100% of your funds must be obligated with a PO. If you've got questions about how the PO system works, please contact your business manager or me. By March 31st, 2023, 100% of your grant funds must be spent, meaning the check must be written. April 14th, 2023 is the end of the grant period, and April 15th, 2023 is when unspent funds must be returned to the Commission. Take a look at the detailed grant timeline in your grant package. The black print is a recommended timeline, but the red print shows required deadlines. This year, we expect back-ordered books to be problematic, so spend your money early. Stay on top of what books have been ordered, what has been back-ordered, and what has been delivered. Here's why. When we order a book, we tend to think the money has been spent when actually the money has not been spent until the book is delivered with an invoice, which is then paid. If a book is back-ordered, the funds reserved with the PO to pay for that book has not been spent. It is still in the account. This year, we recommend that if a book is back-ordered, cancel that order and choose another book. Please put these dates on whatever calendar you live by, along with reminders about a week before. We are calling these best practices, but we could call them lessons learned after 10 years of awarding these grants. Here's a list of things our grantees have found works well. You have some paper documents, but most of your grant documents and all of our communication happens via email. After you've completed the business meeting and the training, find a place to keep all grant-related documents where the whole grant team, including your admins, can access them. If for some reason you're unable to complete the school year or complete the grant period, and all the grant docs are in your email inbox, no one else will be able to get to them, and may not even know that they are there or that they are responsible for them. Be sure your grant team reads the grant agreement and is aware of the requirements. Show everyone where to find the SLA Mini-Grant page on the ICFL website. Set a meeting with the person in your district who will be putting your grant funds in the account, processing your PO requests, and paying the invoices. Find out how long that cycle takes and what needs to happen before the invoice is paid. As you move through your grant, please note these communication musts. If you leave during the grant cycle, please let us know. Even if it's not a happy exit, if you could just send an email to me and let me know that you are no longer the contact point for this grant, it would help immensely. Spend all of your grant money, all of it, every penny. If you encounter problems with spending, please let us know and we can help. Make sure the ICFL email addresses are safe listed and check the junk mail regularly for email communications from me or other ICFL staff members. Let us know about important changes with your grant team or your school. And read the mini grant news email that will come 3 times a year. It will have updates, award news, deadline reminders, and more, and all in a cute infographic-like format. As you're getting started with the grant, take a look at the questions on the interim and final grant reports. You can find those questions on the mini grant website as questions to expect on the interim report and questions to expect on the final report. That way you'll be able to gather the data as you go and won't be taken by surprise by any of the questions on the report. Once you are filling out the interim report, in addition to answering the questions on the report, you will submit a list of book titles you've purchased. That can be the packing list that was sent with the books, a summary slip, or an Excel or Word doc listing the title and author of the books. Please don't use the order or the PO because all those books might not come in your order. Please submit the grant report between December 12th and January the 20th. The form will be available then. A financial update is required with the interim report and must be produced by your accounting software. There is an example of a financial report on the website to give you an idea of what that will look like. It's a good idea to request that financial report before you leave for break. If you've not yet had your family and outreach event, please include a brief description of what you're planning in the interim report. As the end of the grant year approaches, there are some dates and benchmarks that you'll need to meet. All grant funds should be obligated by March the 3rd, 2023 at the very latest. All the funds must be spent, meaning the check must be written by March 31st, 2023. No dollars or cents can be left. If any money, even a penny, is left, you must send it back. No one will be happy about that. For a little cushion, please consider spending a little over the grant amount, say about $20. It's far, far better to be a little over in this case than a little short. The end of the grant period is April the 14th, and any unspent money must be returned by April the 15th, and your final report is due April 28th. For the final report, only submit book titles that you have purchased since the interim report. You don't need to send me the entire book list again. During this business meeting, we've talked a lot about collecting data for your reports, but when we say data, what do we mean? When we talk about data, we really mean 2 kinds of data for the purposes of this report. Hard data is more objective, so we mean increases in circulation, increases in visits to the library, demonstrable improvement in literacy skills, and things along those lines. When we talk about soft data, we mean anecdotal data, so quotes from students and teachers and parents, stories about adventures in the library from your students, relayed stories about improvement in reading from teachers. We love to hear how much the kids are excited about the new books, but we'd also love to hear more about details with some hard data. ICFL reports to the legislature about the impact of these funds. That information comes from your reports. Plus, you can use the data you collect to advocate for your library program. Show your decision makers and funders the amount of reading students do when they have new materials versus the amount of reading they do with an older collection. New, exciting, and interesting books equals more reading, which equals better readers. And speaking of reports, I read them all. We love the kudos and the thank yous, but we also need some information that describes your experience with this grant. It's important to us to keep improving our programs, and to do that, we need input from you. So here are a few tips for writing a great report. Before starting the report, use the list of questions provided on the mini-grant site to help you gather and prepare information for your answers. Use the electronic form provided through the link on the mini-grant page. Read the questions carefully and answer them using clear language. Be careful with the use of words like they, it, things, and other nonspecific language. I tend to get lost in the indirect objects. Use that data gathered through the reporting period for your report. Have a colleague that is unfamiliar with the grant proofread for clarity. If that person can understand what you're trying to say, then probably I will understand what you're saying. And use specific examples. And be sure to proofread. Small details can make a big difference. Book selection was covered thoroughly during the SLA Mini-Grant workshops, but let's do a quick overview here. Book selection is a time-consuming job, so avoid getting overwhelmed with choosing books and spending all your money by starting early and having a plan. Find 1 or 2 review sites that you trust. I like School Library Journal reviews, and Novelist has all of those book review sources. Take student requests into consideration and purchase those titles if they're appropriate for your library. Encourage students to read by having what they like. Bilingual and cultural books are awesome. Be sure to check for stereotypes in books before you purchase. This is really even more important when you read, which we covered during the SLA workshops. Wish lists and teacher suggestions? Yes, but be sure teachers understand these books are primarily for pleasure reading and not for instruction or classroom work. Books for classroom libraries and leveled reading sets? No. Remember, one of the goals is to have kids take the books home and read for fun. Requiring kids to keep books that they check out from the library in their classrooms does not meet the goal of the grant. Perhaps students could check out an additional book to keep in the classroom, but they should be taking books home to read with their families. Avoid the one-stop shop, meaning those deals that say if you buy so many number of books, the organization will give you X number of books for free. This may sound cynical, but those free books might not be the best books. They might be the books that couldn't be sold. Also, many times those package deals are how some of those titles we don't want to see end up on your title list. You want to select the very best books for your students and leave out the leftovers that can't be sold elsewhere. Be sure to keep your grant timeline in mind. You might want to keep a tiny bit of money back until January when the Youth Media Awards are announced, but plan on spending nearly all your money in the first semester of school. And keep in mind that if you are a first-time EEL grantee, you're buying books that are appropriate for 4 to 7-year-olds. If you are a repeat EEL grantee, you're buying books for pre-K through 6th graders. And if you're a secondary grantee, you're buying books for grades 6 through 12. Getting the most bang for your buck doesn't necessarily mean getting the highest number of books for the money. It does mean getting the best books for your students. I like a bargain as much as the next girl, but it's better to get fewer awesome books than lots of so-so or not so good books. We want you to get the very best books that your students will want to read, and those generally don't all come from the same place. They definitely don't come from the same publisher. And so, no more than 50% of your grant funds can be spent with any one publisher. For the purposes of this grant, we are defining a publisher as an organization that produces and sells primarily their own titles. A few examples are Abdo, Gumdrop, Usborne, Scholastic. A vendor is an organization that sells titles from many different publishers. Some examples of those are Amazon, Ingram, Follett, your local independent bookstore, Permabound, or Bound to Stay Bound. Again, it's usually best to avoid the package deal that says if you buy this many books, we'll throw in these books. Sometimes those books are just fine, but sometimes those giveaway books are the books that can't be sold. Just pick the books that your students and collection need. If shopping local or shopping in Idaho sounds like a good option for you, keep in mind that many local vendors offer discounts and free shipping to teachers and librarians. First-time grantees of the Early and Elementary Grant, we want you to purchase great books that young students will be reading with their adults, and not as many books that they should be reading on their own. This helps build their vocabulary and love of reading, and there aren't very many super interesting books with rich vocabulary written at the point 5 AR level. So focus on age-appropriate topics in which your students will be interested, with the understanding that they don't need to be able to read it themselves. Reading levels, which were meant to be used for instruction, are flawed and may do more harm than good when it comes to reading for pleasure. When they get books from the library to take home to read on their own or with their families, let students have what they want. Make it a low-commitment transaction. If they take it home and don't like it, let them return it the next day and try something else. Make the library a place where they are free to choose what interests them. Early and elementary literacy grantees. There are some things that we do not want to see on your title list. Titles like A Child Called It or Hamlet, unless it's a young reader's edition, and reference books that are meant to stay in the library really are not good purchases with these grant funds. Lots of elementary kids are interested in reading about the military, but be careful with books about warfare and pay special attention to make sure those books are age appropriate. First-time grantees, keep in mind that most biographies are for older kids. If you do buy some biographies, make sure they are about people the littles know about. While you are focused on pre-K through first grade, you might consider books with up to a second grade interest level, as some first graders have a little more mature reading interests. Even if you are buying for the littles, it's great to let students from all grades check out these new titles. We recommend not limiting them to pre-K through first grade students. Secondary grantees. Focus on out-of-school reading for pleasure. Buy the books that interest the students. This is for their recreational reading. This grant should not be used for classroom sets, nor literature circle sets, but may be used for extracurricular book clubs. This grant does not directly support classroom projects, but if the books are used for classroom projects, incidentally, then that's fine. It's okay to purchase paperbacks, and more than one, usually not more than 2 or 3 though, of the same popular titles are okay to purchase. 5% of your grant funds can be spent on vendor and processing fees. Consider at least buying the MARC records if they don't come with your books for free. That 5% can save you hours in processing time, getting those books on the shelf and available to kiddos much faster. You can spend up to 20%, less the 5% for processing fees, for your family literacy event or your Create a Culture of Reading project. Use those funds to make your event or project effective. If you have questions about what is allowable or what is not, please call me or email me. We can talk about it and find a way for you to implement your idea. If your circulation policies are changing for this grant, don't wait to start checking out those books till the new ones arrive. Let the kiddos learn and practice with the older books. By the time the new ones are on the shelf, they'll be old pros. We want those books to get into the hands of your kids as soon as possible. Also, again, don't wait to start purchasing. Back-ordered books are a real thing. Don't wait until March to figure out what funds have really been spent and what books are back-ordered. And that brings us to teaching the kids about caring for their books and returning them to the library. We've found that schools that implement the books and backpacks are buddies philosophy have fewer problems with lost and damaged books. The idea is that books are either in your hands or in your backpacks. They aren't at the dinner table or on the side of the bathtub. They aren't in the closet or under the bed. They aren't in the backyard or in the trunk of Grandma's car. They are either being read or they are in the backpack. In addition to helping with the lost and damaged book problem, kids don't have to worry so much about remembering Library Day because the books will necessarily be in their backpack on Library Day. At the beginning of the school year, introduce the system that you will use to help your kids care for and keep track of their books, and practice with your current collection before the new books start coming in. If you take a learn it, know it, live it approach, books and backpacks or buddies really helps limit that lost and damaged book problem. Give books and backpacks or buddies a try. If you teach the kids and train the kids at the beginning of the year, it really helps. If you will be circulating more books than you have in the past, you might be thinking, how am I going to reshelve all those extra books? And I know it's best, but I don't have space to display all these books with the cover out. Give bins a try. Benefits are twofold. They're easy for kids to access and see the covers of the books, and they're quick and easy for librarians to reshelve the books. Let's take a second and revisit the number one goal of the grant, which is to increase the amount of reading done out of school for Idaho students. Sometimes we have to go beyond just checking out books to get that done. We really need to share literacy information with parents so they are reading these books to the kids and encouraging their independent readers to keep reading. Communicate with parents about the benefits of reading and hold your literacy night as early as you can. The goal is that all adults in a child's life know the importance of literacy development and how best to support its growth. There's a sample letter on our website that you can use to get started with communicating with parents and teachers to help get that educational message out. So what else can you expect? Well, you'll receive 3 short little infographic-style newsletters with reminders of upcoming deadlines and short little tidbits throughout the grant year. It takes about 2 minutes to read. We'll have a couple of optional check-in chats. If there's something that you'd like to talk about, or if you'd like to pick the brains of the rest of your cohort, this is the time to get together and talk about what's going on. There will be a short Niche Academy course available soon too, so watch your email inbox for information about that. I'm here to answer your questions whenever you have them, or I can just be a sounding board or share things that we may have learned to solve similar problems in past grant years. Plus, there are all the resources that are available on the mini-grant page. Here is how to find all the information on the mini-grant page that I've mentioned several times throughout the business meeting. Go to libraries.idaho.gov, go to the Library Staff drop-down menu, and from there you'll find the School Libraries drop-down menu on the left-hand side of the page. That will take you to the School Libraries Consulting page, and you'll want to scroll all the way down to the School Library Access Mini-Grant page. Click on there and it will take you to all of the resources that we've been talking about. If you or another representative from your school were unable to attend the in-person business meeting and training, please email me with one detail of this recorded meeting that you found interesting, along with your name and school. Once I receive that email, I'll send you a free book for your library's collection. And in the meantime, please feel free to reach out with any questions that you have to me, Jeannie, or to Talela. We'd be happy to talk with you.